Before we jump right into today's episode, we need a brief disclaimer this time, covering two topics. Firstly, while we are currently preparing our 10th episode, we are still figuring out what the best technical setup is for us. We tried several platforms and have not decided on how to proceed here yet. Using different tools comes with the disadvantage that we have to fiddle with our settings almost every time, and this time I seemingly forgot to select the correct microphone. While you can now hear what I would prefer to sound like, I sound like this in the episode. We are sorry that the quality is bad, and we will make sure to double check in the future. Also, we had a very special guest, and talking with them about their music was so much fun, we decided not to take our time limit of approximately 1 hour too serious and just went on. Due to this decision, we will release this episode in two shorter parts with a combined length that exceeds our usual scope, episode 9 and 9.5 so to speak. This being said, have fun with our newest episode of the Bardcast.
All right, everybody, we're back. Welcome to another episode of the Bardcast. It's been a little while, but I'm really excited because we have a special guest. So first off, I'm Chris. I play Coriakin, and with me, as always, is...
Sunny, and I play as Bingro.
And we actually have a special guest, our newest bard, and I'm really excited because I started a long time ago. Bingro started several years ago now, and within the last year, we got Aurelie. Please introduce yourself.
Hello. My name is Jeff. I play Aurelie in Clanlord. Yay.
Fantastic. And we're really, really excited to have you here. Now, I'm really, really interested, actually, what got you into barding in the first place? Because I do remember pestering you about it for quite a while.
Oh, there were so many people pestering me about it for quite a while. I know you certainly were one of them. Largo's player was one of them, and my very, very dear friend and family member, Azel. I don't know if any of you remember Azel, who used to play Clanlord for quite some time, but she was pestering me for probably the better part of a decade, saying, "Hey, and part of the hook that was used to get me into Clanlord in the first place was, hey, there's this community of musicians who write their own music, and it's in the game, and you totally need to do this because you'd be dumb not to." And so it was just a lot of pestering over many years. And a lot of great bard concerts too. Like I was always kind of enamored with the music of the bards in Clanlord. And I'm like, oh man, that's really cool. That's really pretty. It'd be cool to do something like that or participate in that community. So,
Yeah. Although I have to admit, I'm one of those people when people pester me about something a lot, it tends to sort of push me the other direction in some ways.
right.
But more importantly, like barding is pretty scary. Like when you're making your own art and putting it out in front of people, it's very vulnerable in a lot of ways. So I guess if you don't mind me asking, what made you finally decide to start?
I don't know. I don't know what finally like tipped things over the edge. I don't know if it was a combination of, I don't want to say boredom, but like, you know, you in a game like Clanlord, you get to a point where it's kind of like, okay, well, what is the next thing to do, right? What is the next project to work on? Or and as a healer, you get to a point where it's kind of like, well, nothing has changed in the past like 3 years. I've had some rank numbers go up, but I love the community and I love the charm of Clanlord, and I've always very much appreciated. I don't know if it sounds silly or not, but like the role play aspect of existing in Puddleby, right? And I wasn't about to just turn around and become a mystic, which is probably one of the other larger quote unquote role play communities that still exists in Clanlord. And I'm like, okay, well, my other option is taking something that I love, which is music, and attempting to kind of breach that barrier to entry and finally tackle my big hurdle, or think intimidation, wasn't even so much like, okay, I have to put my music in front of people and I have to hope they like it or appreciate it. I think my biggest hurdle was I just cannot parse this notation, right? I would look at how music in Clanlord was written, and I think if the mid to CL tool didn't exist, I'd probably still be in the same basket I was in before, like painstakingly trying to figure out how to type all this out by hand, and you know, the trial and error of that. But having that tool available, I think, was the the first training wheels that I needed to actually start crunching some things over into the wacky clan lord notation.
But did you learn to read it by now?
I'm getting there. I can at least, more or less find the things that I need to fix in the songs that I'm looking at, but I'm still not not nearly as quick as I wish I were. I have to kind of sometimes like play through certain parts of the notation a couple times before I find, oh, like that's the chord I wanted, not the one over there or not the one over there. So
Yeah, I was brought up on this stuff in, oh gosh, the late 90s. And I remember some of my more depressing retail jobs when I was standing around at a till, just like grabbing a scrap of paper and like writing down ideas in Clanlord notation and text. My brain is a weird place. So how long have you been doing music for before you got involved in Clanlord?
So I have been doing music. I started out as a musician in my 6th grade recorder class. My elementary school didn't have like a band or an orchestra or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, any of the students who were interested in music could buy a $2 plastic recorder and participate in a recorder class that was taught by one of our teachers at the school. I remember being so accomplished that I learned how to play the college hornpipe on my little $2 recorder. And so I started as an instrumentalist. I convinced my parents that they really wanted and needed, and it was essential to my well-being, to help me rent and eventually buy a flute when I got to middle school. I was just dead set on being a flautist for whatever reason. I still, I mean, I love it. I love playing flute. And so come 7th grade, the beginning of middle school, I was in our little middle school concert band and played flute through all of middle school and high school and college. And then just when I was 16, I bought myself a little electric Casio keyboard. I think it was a Casio. I don't remember. And started kind of plunking around, and I'm sure driving my family crazy as I'm attempting to teach myself to play piano songs by ear. And then when I was 19 and moved out of the house, I maxed out a credit card and bought an HP 101 electric piano and stuck it in my apartment and would spend like 2 or 3 hours a day just making horrible noises and gradually trying to get those noises to sound less horrible.
That's awesome. At my school, we call those learning sounds.
Yeah. Yep. Learning sounds. There we go.
That's so cool. So you've been doing music throughout your whole life. That's really, really awesome. Was there anything about the flute that jumped out at you, or is just like for some reason you were just dead set on it?
So as a kid, I picked the instrument when I was 11 years old, somewhere around there. And so my paradigm was a little different than it is today. I think if I had a choice to like go back in time and re-choose my main instrument, I would pick something different. But I appreciated that flutes didn't have reeds. Wasn't really interested in buying reeds all the time and maintaining. I did want to play a woodwind instrument, and I really liked the idea of playing melody all the time. And so I'm like, sweet, flute players get to sit in the front row, usually play the melody notes, and they're really cool, and look how cool they are. I want to play flute. I was the only male flute player in my middle school and high school, and for a couple of years, the only male flute player in college, which I thought was rather weird because I knew of a lot of very famous and accomplished professional male flute players. I just don't know where they came from. I never really saw them growing up, so it was pretty fascinating.
That's interesting. I mean, my experience as an elementary school band teacher is that flutes tend to be a little more female than male, just in terms of the students who are interested, but it really depends on the year. So maybe you just got unlucky.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because when I listen to your music, I write music like a piano player. It's pretty obvious if you play piano. Like everything I do is pianistic, but like your music is very melody based. So I'm not surprised that you, to some extent, might think like a flute player.
Well, and even for the past several years, the shift in my musical, I don't know, background or whatever it might be, but shortly after I got married, my wife dragged me to a choir audition. I'd never sung in choirs before. I'd never really sung at all, other than in the shower or in the car or along with pop music. And she's like, "You're coming to this choir audition with me, and you're gonna audition with me." And I almost didn't make it out of the car. Right? I was like, "There's no way you're getting me to sing in front of people who know actually how to sing." So I sang in this audition with my wife. She was kind of squeezing. Well, I was squeezing her hand the whole time. We were sitting right next to her and had a death grip, and I was trembling and shaking. And so I sang in this audition, absolutely terrified. And they had the audacity to give me a solo in the production that we were auditioning for. And that was just the most terrifying, wonderful, amazing experience of my life. And I have never been able to stop singing since then. So all of my musical shift and over the past like 8 or 9 years has been, what choirs can we be in? What groups can we sing in? I ended up singing in a couple operas and in 2 or 3 performance groups here in the valley where we live, touring to New York with this choir that we're in right now. And so I haven't really touched the flute for quite some time. It's all been vocal stuff for the last little while.
Yeah, it can be very rewarding to step out of your comfort zone and try something new you're not comfortable doing. I had the very much the same experience. My father sang in the choir for I think 35 years now. So at some point I wanted to join that, and at first they accepted me being there, and now I'm getting close to being somewhat a support to the others. So I did step out of my comfort zone quite a bit there as well, and I've been to Barcelona 2 years ago, and I sung in the lower part of the cathedral, Sagrada Familia. Maybe if you're familiar with it. It's a huge church in Barcelona, and those are the experiences I would have never gotten without starting in this choir, stepping out of my comfort zone, singing in front of people, and just going on that journey.
That's really cool. I had a somewhat similar experience in that I was in university and one of my professors was like, "Hey, we need more basses in choir. Sing with us." And I'm like, "I can't sing, but I can sight read." She's like, "Perfect, join us." And ever since then, I don't know. I'm of the opinion there's something kind of magical about singing that is qualitatively different than instrumentalist. It's the fact that you're using your own voice, you're joining your voice with other people. It's really, really can be satisfying to the soul in so many ways, in a way that honestly I'm not sure instrumental music can always match.
I totally agree. The great part for me is being part of that huge instrument of people and having this influence on the sound and the feeling in the room. I prefer singing myself than going to a concert to just listen, because I like that feeling, the influence to bring other people the joy of listening to it. Hopefully, joy.
Oh, definitely joy. No, I some of the main things that I found that I've kind of cling on to as a vocalist as opposed to an instrumentalist, I'm trying to take the best of both worlds, right? I realized as soon as I was deep enough in the choir world, a couple things that kind of put a chip on my shoulder a little bit, at least with my choir experience. And one of them was that choral musicians can't sight read to save their lives. And that's probably not true, but in the groups that I ended up in, I'm like, oh, come on, you guys, like, watch the conductor, do some sight reading. It's going to be okay. Don't be scared. But at the same time, like, I also can't sing very well when I'm sick. And as an instrumentalist, being sick was less of an impediment, right? But being a vocalist, one thing I really, really appreciate is having so much control over the color of my tone, if that makes sense. Like, for this song, we're super bright. We're super, we want to be bright and out there and very forward in, in where you're resonating. And for another song, it'd be super dark and super legato, and you can control your vibrato more than I could. So maybe had I been more skilled as an instrumentalist, I would have similar sorts of control over the sounds that I was making. But as a vocalist, it's so much more of a visceral sort of feeling. Like, it feels different to sing brightly than it does to sing with a darker tone color, or it feels different to sing with certain types of intensity as opposed to others. So I got kind of addicting after a while. I was like, oh, this is really cool.
Yeah, and you have the new dimension of actual words, some meaning you can also transport through your music, which is quite difficult with instrumentals.
Yeah, no, I love all that, and it makes total sense. Again, I come from the piano world where you push a button and the sound comes out. So you have no control over tone quality. You don't think about breathing. You don't think about any of these things. So when I started singing in university, when I learned to play band instruments when I was getting ready to become a teacher, this was like a whole new world for me, which is really, really cool. But on the other hand, it has kind of helped me in some ways for Clanlord, because I'm used to this limitation of like the basic MIDI. You can't control the quality of the sound, which is something that we really, really lack in some ways with the music that we make.
Mm-hmm.
Although, if you're careful, you can come up with some interesting stuff. And actually, I think this would be a great time to talk about your first piece that we have on our list today. Bingro, which was the one you wanted to talk about?
I wanted to talk about Dancing Shadows.
Aurelie, or Jeff, I should say, can you tell us anything about it?
So Dancing Shadows was one of my, I don't think I used it for my Questor audition, but it was for one of my Bard audition pieces. So one of the earlier things that I've ever written. It was one of the ones that did start out with me plunking out things on a piano. So I think I still have the old piano recording of how this song sounded in its inception. Had I been a little bit more thoughtful, I probably would have sent those to you beforehand so that we could listen to parts of it. But it was, it was me sitting in my lonesome in I don't think I was in the garage at the time, but wherever it was where I had my piano set up, and just, I don't know how in depth I should get into like the quote unquote songwriting process or not, but
I'd actually love for you to get very into it, but why don't we listen to it first? Anything you want to say before we start playing it?
I don't think so. I think you just pull the trigger.
All right, here we go. Dancing Shadows. Well, I mean, there's a reason why you passed your Bard audition.
I hope that's a good thing, right? That's good.
Oh, indeed, indeed.
I feel like I almost have less to say about these earlier pieces than I do about some of the more recent ones, because they almost feel like they were less intentional, right? It was Dancing Shadows was one of those ones that, like I said, I played first on the piano, and because of the way that I play piano, or the way that I don't know, it sounds very different on the piano in my garage than it does here in Clanlord MIDI, recreation, right? And I think a big part of that is that because pretty much everything I write, we've mentioned in the past, and for the sake of the podcast, for those who might not know, I have almost zero theory background. I have never taken music classes in my life other than bands and orchestras and choir instruction. So the instruction that I've received on how to be a musician has been geared around how to perform music, how to control the way that you make sounds and understand and attempt to interpret what other people have written. And so when it comes to the theory behind music composition, I pretty much have zero background, right? Like, I know what a chord is, I know the circle of fifths, I know all those things that people need to know in order to be a decent musician and a decent sight reader, but that's about it. And so writing music is essentially just me, especially for a piece like Dancing Shadows, was essentially just me sitting down at my piano and just improvising for a good, half hour, hour and a half, until I would stumble upon a melody or something that I thought sounded interesting, and then start doing variations on that melody, right? And so Dancing Shadows was one of those, like, oh, this is cool. If and it's a very like muscle memory sort of thing. As I'm sitting there at the piano, I'm like, oh, this pattern sounds cool and feels interesting to play. But as I'm playing on the piano, one of the things I noticed with some of these earlier pieces is that I play these pieces on the piano with like extreme amounts of rubato. So I'm speeding up and slowing down, and I have a lot of control over dynamics and what notes I'm emphasizing, and all of my earlier kind of Quester pieces and earlier Bard pieces changed dramatically as I was moving them from like piano brain to clanlord brain because of my limitations in the notation and in the system that I'm still working to overcome. I don't like none of them have any sort of tempo variation or any sort of like rubato sort of tempo variation at all. And when I first listened to Dancing Shadows after kind of porting it over to Clanlord, it almost felt jarring to me, right? Like this tempo is very exact. And that sounded weird to my ear for someone who'd played these with a lot of freedom and a lot of fluidity. And so it took a little bit of getting used to. I don't hate them, obviously. Like I don't think I've written anything other than maybe one song that I just don't really like. But it was an interesting sort of beast getting it from, this very, very rubato, very, very lyrical piano sort of piece that kind of almost ethereal sounding to Dancing Shadows, which is a little bit more or less of many of those things, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know.
It makes total sense, actually. I had a very similar experience with I'll Find a Way Back Home because, again, I played on piano and I pedal super, super heavily. Everything is sustained, and you don't get that in Clanlord. So, like, when you have an idea in your head, often one of the hardest things, especially if you're not trained in theory, is how do I take this idea in my head? How do I represent it in a way that someone else could perform? And then taking that from how can I take this idea in a way that a computer could perform with any sort of musicality at all is a real challenge. Absolutely.
Yeah, and not having those guidelines I have because I did somewhat learn music theory. Not having those would make it so much harder for me to write anything because I do have some guidelines. I do know, okay, this is the dominant, and then I'll go follow with the tonic, or I could also follow it up with something completely different. But it all makes some kind of sense in my head, and I do have some steps I can follow, and then break those rules where I like them to be broken. But not having those ideas, this music theory behind that, I feel like that's pretty awesome to be able to do that. I think Seppel was also not that versed in music theory as well. So we have two on the podcast already.
Yeah, a similar process to Zappel, definitely. And honestly, I think a lot of people start that way. Like just having fun, making sounds is the place to start. And then over time, when you're I always think about music theory as a toolbox now that you can steal things from. As your toolbox expands, whether or not you've studied theory, you figure out things that work, which is what music theoreticians have done for years. So, Bingro, what did you want to say about this piece?
I wanted to ask a question first. I was wondering how, after you finished writing your song, how do you name your songs? When do you name your songs? Because I have found some things in the song that I would say resemble some kind of shadow theme. So I'm interested in, did you do them on purpose, or did you listen to the song and then decide, oh, that sounds like Shadows Dancing?
The latter. I think I love this question. This is fascinating because I think it's for all of my pieces except for one. Actually, maybe two. For all of the pieces, no, just one. I can say that with confidence. For all of my pieces except for one piece, the title was the very, very last thing. And oftentimes I'm actually sitting in the middle of town, playing the song several times for folks and saying, what does this make you think of? What does this make you feel? What sorts of images? If you had to tell a story based on this song, what would you tell? And I take all that information from other exiles and other folks in Puddleby. And that's when I'll be like, okay, this is kind of what I would want to title this song. The only exception to that, and I actually feel like it's fairly obvious, the only exception to that process was a song like Fire, which started with the title because I got the title from Val and I thought it was so cool. I'm like, I need to write a song that'll fit the title, A Song Like Fire. And the entire process of writing that song was an attempt to make it sound like what fire would sound like if it were a song, right? But other than that one, all of my other pieces have been titled after the fact. The piece is done, it's pretty much complete and finalized, and I sit here and I listen to it with my head down on the computer, probably an inordinate amount of times. I think my wife is probably like, "You've listened to that 20 times in a row. It's only 2 minutes long, so I'm sure it gets obnoxious. And that's kind of when I finally land or decide on a title. When it comes to Dancing Shadows, I think, like you said, it resembled a lot of these pieces that other bards have written in regards to the shadow plane and experiences there. And I'm like, I've got a shadowy song. I can title this some sort of shadowiness. And that's where that one came from, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. So maybe if we look into the song in general, since you said you're not that into music theory, you'll have to go through that with me. We're in E flat minor, which has 6 flats, and if you remember, if you have listened to, or if the audience remembers the second episode we did when we talked about the third movement of My Shadow Suite, we were talking about which key resembles shadow and which key resembles light for me throughout the suite. And my shadow key is A flat minor, and your E flat minor has only one less flat than my A flat minor. So my theory, your gut feeling, some kind of going to the same direction. And I found that very fascinating because for me, the more flats I have, the more shadows are in the song. And you seem to have the same feeling when you decided on or landed on E flat minor. So that was pretty interesting. I guess that wasn't intentional, but I found that very interesting.
Yeah. Can I jump in for just a second?
Sure.
Because this is, again, related to what you said in a previous episode, Bingro, about how adding flats makes the quality of a sound darker in some ways to our ears. And again, Aurelie, this is what you were talking about earlier about tone color. We don't have nearly as much control as we have with our voices, but we do have that little bit of control here, adding sharps to give it a brighter sound or flats to give it a darker sound, I think.
So then we have a structure. The structure is, and you might correct me on that, but I think it is A, B, C, D, A. So we have an A section, we have a B section, a C section, a D section, and then we're going back to A just before the end. Maybe you feel different. Maybe you do feel like C and D are together or something like that, but that's what I felt like. And going into the A section, we come to the first thing where I thought that is, there you portray shadow. You have those arpeggios, those broken up chords that have that upwards movement and have this bright color and resemble, something like light for me.
You mean this part right here?
Exactly.
Cool. Awesome. Anyway, carry on.
Meanwhile, the melody seems to be in the shadow of those arpeggios. It's not that clear. It's not that obvious. So the light is on top, and the shadow is a bit in the shadows. So there's the melodies in the shadows. At least that's the feeling I got. I maybe that was intentional, but what do you have to say about that?
I like it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's better put than I ever could with because I don't think what I did was accidental, obviously, but having it put, and I don't know if I'll be able to think of it any differently now after you said it like that. But yeah, no, the melody was like I don't want to say intentionally obscured by the arpeggios, but I don't know. I just think that seems to be a musical habit of mine is kind of just building things either on top of or inside of other musical patterns, right? I think that I do that a lot in various ways. And maybe that's a common musical device. I don't know, but I'll usually start with like a pattern and then add to that pattern and then add to the added to pattern and then kind of do stuff like that. And but I like that. I think it fits very well.
Yeah. Although what's interesting here is after hiding the melody, like in my ears, that arpeggio was the melody. And it's only when it comes in that second time through, let's see if I can skip ahead to that part, where you actually double it at the octave below, that it really becomes obvious, oh, wait, this was actually the melody the whole time. So I think it's here. Yeah, it's when you repeat it so regularly, I guess rhythmically, it really, really adds to the clarity, which is a nice bone to the audience who are very confused to start, I suppose. Actually, you know what? Sorry, Bingro. So if that's the A section, where do you find the B section starting? Ah, okay, it's this part then. Cool. Yeah, that was interesting for me as well because I actually really, really enjoyed the beginning of this section. Actually, is this the part I'm thinking about? I believe it is. Oh, yeah. So this is how the A section ends. And in my head, that chord is a repeated chord, which will delay the cadence to get you the full eight bars. So it'll be a nice square phrase. But it's not. It always messes me up because that's actually the first chord in the next section. And I love that little sense of like, oh, my expectations were wrong. I love that in pieces. Was that something you'd planned to do earlier, or was that just like figuring stuff out and that's what
No,
the way it
it
worked?
was actually. I generally like 8-bar phrases are my bread and butter, right? Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of people because they're just very, very aesthetically pleasing to listen to. Your regular everyday 8-bar phrase. But like jumping into in my head, like this B section that we're talking about or about to start talking about is where like the dancing part of Dancing Shadows actually starts in earnest, right? And I wanted that to the whole point of leading into this section was it was 2 parts. I think it was me doing the best I could with the limitations that I was finding myself butting up to against in Clanlord, which is I don't have a lot of characters to work with, right? Many of these songs at their inception were probably at least twice as long as they are, but I'm not very good at repeating those phrases and structuring things in a way that I can make longer songs. Part of that I think is that as I get closer to working with multiple parts, then that can lead to longer music because you have fewer notes and characters per instrument, yada yada. That's neither here nor there. But because I'm like, okay, well, this has got to be short, I almost wanted launching into that section to feel like a surprise. Like, oh, this is not completely different, but this is different than the vibe that we had at the beginning of the song. Hence the tempo change. So, this didn't originally have a change in tempo, even though I think it's kind of subtle, maybe not so subtle. But that's where the tempo change comes in and kind of launching straight into that chord into the next section. So yeah, that was definitely intentional.
Cool.
Yeah, something else in the middle part that is a talking point Coriakin brings up very often. It's contrast. You have this arpeggios, high, bright arpeggios, and then you stop with that. You come to block chords. You crunch whatever you had before is nullified, and you're just in some more structured territory. You tone it down. You go into the lower octaves, which is the second thing that I thought resembled Shadows. It's a completely different part while maintaining a few things like the eighth notes that are part of the accompaniment. That's what I thought about the second part, the middle part, the middle section, B, C, and D, more or less is in the same tone to me, but have their different ideas and different strategies which make them work.
Yeah, Aurelie, actually, I had a question for you on that subject. Just now that I'm looking at the notes, it looks like most of the time, most of what you're playing sticks to 2 octaves at a time, as opposed to using a full 3 at once. Is that just because you played it with your hands, so 2 hands over 2 octaves?
Yep, that is essentially the piano creeping in, right? Like the way that I'm not often over 3 octaves on a piano, mostly because it's more difficult or my ear didn't quite like the way many of the things that I wrote that way sounded. But yeah, I'm usually playing fairly close together with my left hand and right hand. And because this song came from noodling around on a piano, a lot of the things, and like many of the things that I wrote, it kind of that sticks around for moving on into Clanler notation. And I think I just got in the habit of I like the way it sounds. I have a harder time, reconciling 3 octaves, maybe even because of the limitations of my own little old electric piano that sometimes it doesn't sound quite as good. But
It's certainly possible, but also, I mean, limiting your range does give you a change in tone color, so which allows you to give a sense of a little bit of musicality, even with the roboticness of the MIDI sounds. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention, Bingro, or should I go on my usual rant?
You can go on your usual rant.
All right. So I was really glad that you chose this, Bingro, because it's a very good example of Aurelie's music, but also of it shows that this is one of your earlier pieces in some ways. There's some limitations to this which you've already overcome in your music, which is really, really cool. But at the same time, they're not necessarily bad. They're just different. So what was interesting to me is something you actually skipped over, Bingro, which was what Bingro, you'll hate this, but the C section. There we go. We joked about that last time. Because your first idea is this. With the arpeggios, your second idea is these longer low chords. But then that C section is actually where you combine those two ideas. Where you have this arpeggio figure again combined with the low chords, which is really, really neat for me. I think it's actually a clever way to do things. Take separate idea, have them interact in interesting and different ways. I mean, we did a whole freaking episode about developing ideas, so it's kind of my jam, and I love the way you did that there.
This is either a good or a bad habit of mine when it comes to writing music for Clanlord or writing music in the MIDI format in general, because literally, I still do this. I think even in some of my my newer pieces, is I'll take what I've written so far, or I'll take like the B section and the A section, and I will, to try and generate ideas, and sometimes it works awesome and sometimes it fails catastrophically, I will literally copy paste them on top of each other in my MIDI editor and then just play it and see like, oh, how does it mix together if I attempt to put these two melodies on top of each other, or if I attempt to turn one of these former melodies into a harmony for something else. And sometimes I love it and it's tweakable and a lot of fun, and other times it's cacophonous and horrible and I don't ever want to do it again. But I like that. But so from my standpoint, I'm sure there are lots of theory things behind that, but literally it's just me sitting here at my keyboard saying, I wonder what it would sound like if I copy pasted both of these melodies on top of each other, because theoretically they're in the same key, so it could be really cool, right? And that's the extent of like the intent behind it, is just wanting to play with cool sounds. So
yeah. And it works super, super well. And even when it doesn't work, it's usually interesting and hilarious.
Yep.
All right. So I love the end of this as well. You have this little build-up, and then you have what Bingro called the D section, I assume. And I really like this one because you have these big, chonky block chords, which is, again, something very different than what's happened before. But I hope you don't mind if I put on my Bard Master hat for a sec and say that this is the one area of the piece where I feel like it really shows it's one of your earlier pieces, because it's a creative choice I'm not sure I buy, because this is a fantastic section. Why is it just a transition back to the A section? It's right. So short. It's actually something that I think could be a whole part of a piece, or it could be like if you'd repeated the A and B sections a few times, and then this was almost like functioning like a bridge in a pop song, where it was a dramatically different thing. I think it could really stand out. I mean, I think it's unfair to say that it's like an idea you're wasting or throwing away. That's not fair, but it's something that could be developed more. So what I did last night is I did some poking around.
Ooh.
So I was wondering, what if you got away from using just 2 octaves and got up to doing 3 octaves? So I was like, okay, what if I just like literally copy and paste like you're talking about? Oh, and then I muted those top notes. And then it gives it this big sense of fullness. But then I'm like, hang on, just going into it isn't enough. So what if I extend that cadence you've got up there, that little transitional chord, and then I'm like, well, if we're going to go up another octave, what if we expand it a little bit? So and it gives this way of really making the entrance of the section really dramatic, just like expanding bigger and bigger. Although then, of course, being me, I'm like, now hang on a second. but I kind of want to have some more rhythm in the bass now. So what if I cut off like just the first part of each note, and then it sounds like this? And then I'm just like going, it's me. So I'm going off on this rabbit hole of like, what if I change this? What if I change this? And then I realized at some point, hang on, now I'm actually starting to lose some of what made the original section cool. Because now I've got this low note, which is adding to the rhythm, but the block chordness is... Anyway, the point is that this is what, at least for me, the creative process is like, where you're like trying different things, throw things at it. I'm fast enough with my computer. What I used to do with my hands, I can now iterate on the computer fast enough. But anyway, the point is just like, I really like this piece, but it's really cool to see how far you've come as well, because a lot of these things I'm talking about are things you now do with your later pieces. Anyway, I fell into my usual thing of like, oh, this is good music. Let's make it mine now.
No, I love it.
Sorry.
I love it. Well, and you're absolutely right. Like, I listen to older pieces like Dancing Shadows, and especially like the Questor pieces and Bard pieces, and I hear those sections where I can definitely feel where I was limited and might still be limited in some degree, right? Because at the piano, like Dancing Shadows, that section where we get to those big old blocky chords, I'm like wailing on my keyboard. Like, it is the most intense, obviously loudest portion of the song, and I very much struggled translating that into Clanlord notation within my own limitations, because I'm like, this sounds too close to the same as what the rest of the song sounded like. It's supposed to be the most intense, the most, volume of sound, but I'm just not as skilled with dynamics and not as skilled with structuring the chords the way that my brain wants to structure them. So it's cool. It's cool to hear. Limitations make us creative, right? And I think that as we're trying to overcome the limitations of the notation or octave limits or whatever it might be, when you get stuff like you were able to noodle around with last night, and I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. I wish, that I definitely would have wanted to do something like that at the time with this song. I think it's been really neat to find creative solutions to some of those limitations.
Actually, can I jump in for a sec?
Please.
It's really interesting to me. You talk about how on your piano you're wailing and make it big, because I feel it wants to go there. And again, what I did here was trying to do that sort of thing. Originally, I actually tried to double it at all 3 octaves, and that got to be too much. But it's interesting that, like, for as much as you're talking about, technical limitations in terms of understanding the format of how to write stuff, your ideas, like, I can't complain about them at all. You've got some sick ideas. And it's just a matter of, like, again, one of the hardest parts is how do you take what's in your brain or on your piano keyboard and cram it into Clanlord. I solved this by using a whole bunch of different instruments at once.
Yep.
Because I cheat all the time. Yeah, I really enjoyed this piece. I was very, very happy that you decided to start writing. I was just as impressed as I thought I would be at your auditions. And I've just been enjoying everything you've written. And actually, just as a segue, what I've really, really been enjoying is how you've been getting into pieces with lyrics. Because I would love to talk about Training Wings next.